Hey guys, just a reminder, my online course is Birth Story Academy, and you can enroll in it at birthstory.com. It's taught by me. You can be in your jammies. It's online. It's pre-recorded, and it has a ton of freebies and downloads. It's everything that you need to prepare for your hospital birth. So hope to see you in Birth Story Academy. Hey guys. Ooh, I have a treat for you today. I interviewed the founder of the Homebirth approach, Bec Conant. She is in Boston, Massachusetts, and she is a doula and a yoga instructor and a childbirth educator and a hypnobirth educator. And she brings all of that wealth of knowledge and shares about how that played a role in her own birth story, which had a lot of twists and turns and unexpected events, and how it remained a positive birth experience. And then she talks about the Homebirth approach. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share it with a friend, especially someone you know that is pregnant, that really loves yoga. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Hey, Bec, welcome to the Birth Story podcast.
Thank you.
I am so happy that you are here and that you have reached out from Boston, Massachusetts. And today we're here to talk all about you and your birth story and your offerings and how you are making waves in positive birth experiences. So let's start with a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you. So as you said, I'm a Boston native gal. I actually grew up in Boston. I live just outside in Framingham now. And I run a company called Homebirths, sort of like Om from yoga births. It's focused on pre and postnatal yoga, so helping people through that whole journey of feeling movement, feeling comfortable in your body while you're pregnant, offering childbirth education classes, longer series, shorter series, depends on what you need. It's primarily online, but I do offer a couple of in-person classes in the Boston area, and especially for the yoga classes, those are all also live streamed. So the idea was someone who's not local to the Boston area might still be able to pop in on a class, and actually as part of our membership, which is sort of the one-stop shop, you get everything. With that one, it's called the Full Mama membership. But we have some people I have a mom from Wyoming right now. There's a mom from California. And there is one mom in our mommy meditation group who's in Germany who joins us. So she joins at kiddo bedtime while we're in the middle of the day.
Oh, I love it. This is very aligned back with my local doula company. So my local doula company is Birth Story Boutique. I employ 14 doulas here at the time of this recording, but we're very focused on, and everything we do is in person, but we do breathwork workshops and we do yoga and we do mindfulness and meditation. in preparing our private doula clients. So it's an opportunity for bonding between like myself as a doula and my private client when we're working together on these things long months and months and months before they ever go into birth.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, these are the keys that, I think both of us believe are the tools that are necessary for positive birth experiences. So let's talk about like, how did you get here? What was life like for you? Did you go to college and just decide like, okay, I'm going to do home births one day? I mean,
Right.
how did you get here?
What was the long and winding road to be here?
Exactly.
So the irony is I did not ever expect to be in the birth world. I went to college and I remember I was a dance major in college, and I remember we had a class all about voicing your identity and coming up with this. And I actually said to the teacher, I don't want to make women art. I want to make, I want to do, I don't know, I wanted some kind of eclectic crazy pieces, but I didn't want to be focused on women's bodies, women's issues. I was like, no, it's too out there. It's too granola crunchy. And then I left college. I moved to New York. I got trained as a yoga teacher, Om yoga, vinyasa, Ashtanga. I mean, sweaty, hot flow, not prenatal at all.
But what's your favorite kind?
My favorite, well, see, this has changed.
Okay.
My favorite kind, at the time, my favorite kind was just sort of nice, fun, sweaty flow yoga with a good playlist. I now practice something that's much closer to like a slow flow sort of practice. Barbara Baina is one of my big inspirational yoga teachers. And I mean, she'll have you do a sun salutation and it'll take an hour to do it.
Very slow.
She's just really dialing you in. And before anybody thinks, oh my God, she's doing hour-long sun salutations with prenatal people, no. I would say when I teach prenatal, it's a marriage of the two. There is a flow, there is some breathing, obviously, there is some physicality to it, and then there is a lot of deep meditative detail work. And I think part of that is how I got into prenatal yoga. I always say the universe conspired to get me into birth work.
It is a calling. Being a birth worker is a calling, and it hunts you down and you try to ignore it and it hunts you some more. And then eventually you just surrender. So
yeah,
this is where.
In my case, I taught a regular yoga class. It was my first vinyasa yoga class. I was so excited. I walked in, I had my whole playlist and everything. There were 7 pregnant people in that class, and 5 of them were, or at least 3 or 5 of them were in the 3rd trimester. I totally freaked out. I had no idea what to do. And I started casting around for somebody give me a prenatal training. Oh my God, this is like, I don't want to hurt the baby. And it just kind of organically grew out of that. And I think it's sort of a thing that once you've taken a prenatal training, and I now offer a prenatal teacher training because I feel like every training I took was lacking a little bit, which is why I took 3 of them before I actually went and taught my own class. But it was like every studio started asking, can you teach prenatal? And I was like, well, okay, I guess I can teach prenatal. And then I left New York. I moved back to Boston, hometown. And I thought, well, I'll just teach regular yoga. Nope, every studio, can you teach prenatal? We're really looking for a prenatal teacher. And local space. Do you think you'd get trained in teaching childbirth education while you're at it? Oh, okay, sure, I guess I'll do that. The first doula client was a complete fluke. It was back in New York. I was teaching prenatal, and I had this student who just randomly came up to me and said, I'm looking for this thing. It's called a doula. You have any idea how I might find one? And I tell this story in the book, the Homebirth's Approach, where I just kind of sat there flabbergasted for a moment going, I did tell the universe that you needed to give me a client or I wasn't going to become a doula, but I didn't think you were going to show up in a week. Okay. And I mean, as I'm sure was true with you, that first birth is eye-opening to what you see. And
it was ecstatic. I mean, I still think every birth is, but I walked away with so much energy.
Mm-hmm. I walked away with so much energy, and at the same time, I walked away with a real uncertainty of, did I actually ever want to go back into that level of an intense space? Like, I remember I woke up the next morning in my apartment in New York and thought, I'm not sure I ever want to go do that again. That was wild. That was crazy.
Mm-hmm. And the next day is the birth crash.
Yes.
That's where you have given, like you have offered to the person giving birth every ounce of energy in your entire body. You've given them away physically, your double hip squeezes and your massage, but you've given emotional energy. And then I would say, like, every time you touch a woman during a contraction or a person giving birth in a contraction, you are giving them everything inside of you so that they can continue on. And you're left very depleted.
You are. I will say, after 12 years of doing it, I did learn where the boundary line was, where the place is, because there is a certain amount where, yes, you are giving energy in a birth experience when you are holding space for someone like that. But at the same time, and when I'm doing my teacher training, we have a big meditative component for it, because I say birth is the most intense experience and intense meditation that you can possibly do. But you can't hold a space if you can't hold your seat. So you need to have a solid grounding yourself. And then, yes, the next day, you need to have someone who's going to you. I started having a standing massage appointment after every birth, where I'd come back, have that crash moment, you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, kind of a, whoa, okay. And I'd call my friend Lauren, and I'd say, Lauren, and after about 5 weeks of this, she was like, she just knew. I'd call her, I'd say, Lauren, and she'd say, all right. She said, another one? I said, yeah. She said, come by at 3. And that was how I'd like put the energy back in.
I'm so glad a lot of doulas listen to this podcast. And I'm so glad you're mentioning this, because I run an internship teaching doulas. They finish their doula training and then they kind of come to me, and I'm like, all right, it's a free internship, but I'm like, let me teach you what you're not going to learn in that class. And one of the weeks is completely focused on self-care after a birth. And in my own business, one of the foundations of my business was, how do I give back to these doulas that are giving everything? And so we do restorative yoga together. That is something that is very, very important. So I know, Bec, I've gotten us way off track at this point.
Well, this will happen because we both love birth so much, and there is so much to talk about. But I will just circle back around to say the reason that I did continue was on that day after that, with that huge birth crash, thinking, I don't know if I ever want to do this again. I also had an insight moment of, I don't think I'm allowed to have learned what I just learned last night in that massively intense experience about what worked. I'm not allowed to know that and not share it. I have, and I remember thinking, well, shoot, I got to go back then. And from there, it really did become that the universe just kept throwing clients at me, kept throwing people at me. I moved back to Boston thinking I'd never do doula work again. And again, first prenatal class, student comes up, I'm looking for a doula. Do you happen to know? I was like, good. Really? Okay. All right, fine.
Our prenatal teacher, We have two prenatal teachers that teach our private doula clients on Wednesday nights. So we're recording on a Wednesday. On Wednesday nights at 6:30. I am constantly telling them, you should be a doula, because neither of them are doulas. I'm like, you should be a doula. It is very aligned. I have to pass along the number one question that I get about, Bec just mentioned all of the different yogas, right? When I was really young, I liked hot yoga. Now I do something called chillax. I don't even know what chillax is, but it's kind of like, it's pretty slow, pretty chill, a lot of focus on breath work. It changes over time. It changes as our bodies change. But one thing clients are very confused on is if they've done yoga prior to getting pregnant and having a doula. They're very confused on the difference between the yoga classes that they know and love and a prenatal yoga class, and what the difference is, and if they can do both or if they should just do prenatal. So could you just share a little bit as a yoga instructor and as a doula and an expert in birth work, the answer to that fundamental question that confuses every yogi when they find out they're pregnant?
Right. And I hear this all the time. I've been taking my regular yoga classes. Can I continue? Should I continue? And isn't prenatal yoga just very, very gentle stuff? So the difference between your conventional general population yoga class and a prenatal focused yoga class, it's sort of obvious, and yet people seem to constantly miss this, is that the general population yoga class is going to be doing certain movements and postures which are not appropriate for a prenatal body. They're going to be doing poses that might involve lying on your stomach. They're going to be doing poses that might involve twisting and squeezing your belly against your thigh. They're going to be doing poses and sequences, especially if you're in an Ashtanga class, that involve jumping and sudden, fast movements. It's not that you cannot ever do these things. It depends. If someone's 6 weeks pregnant, you can still lie on your belly. That's not going to be a problem. But the focus of your general population class is not on nurturing and supporting and balancing your body through pregnancy and in preparation for labor and birth.
Okay.
So it's really a case of, I say, go ahead, take your regular yoga class, but understand that the teacher teaching that class probably doesn't really have a clear picture of what's happening in your body while you're pregnant. Yoga has so many myths out there about what is safe for a female body, what is safe for a pregnant body. And when I wrote the Homebirth approach, there's a whole chapter in there about myths yoga has for pregnancy. And if you ask a standard yoga teacher, if a pregnant student comes to class, what should you not have them do? You will get a list of poses that effectively take out the entire rest of the class. They can't lie on their stomach. They can't lie on their back. They can't lie on their left side. They can't lie on their right side. They can't do any balancing. They can't do any twisting. They can't do any core. Not all of this is true, by the way. But there's such a sense of fear and mythology in the yoga world about what's appropriate, what's not, that the general population classes, they just get very muddied.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to me in your story where you were teaching traditional yoga and all of a sudden you had 5 pregnant clients and probably had a lot of those fears. Like, how do I modify my class today? Right. One of the things that I wish to see in the world, and maybe you have this in Boston, but we do not have this in Charlotte, North Carolina, is there are not different levels: beginner, intermediate, advanced, prenatal yoga. It's a general prenatal yoga class. And I find that my yogis that have been doing yoga for a long time, get quite bored in a prenatal class that covers everyone from a beginner yogi to a very advanced yogi. And often if they are very advanced, they will do a mix. They will come to the prenatal yoga, but they'll say, I just didn't get that deep enough kind of workout, I guess,
Right.
that they were craving. So do you have anything like that in Boston where it's leveled?
I don't right now because my class schedule is fairly small at the moment because I am mother to a 7-year-old, and teaching a 15 classes a week is just a little beyond my energy level right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
But when we Homebirths for a period of time had a physical space, and we did have a level 2 prenatal class, and my rule for that was you must have been practicing yoga for at least a year, if not 2, so that I knew you understood a little bit. But we did wheel, we did headstand, we did the advanced poses. And I actually feel that what you just said, that the advanced yogis don't get enough of what they would say, I don't get enough of a practice in a prenatal class. I think that speaks to a need for deeper level of teaching in a prenatal class. Because
focus more on the meditation and the breath work rather than...
No, I think focus more on which postures are actually effective in balancing your particular body and letting and leading people to go all the way in to the practice.
Okay, so let's talk right there. This is the perfect opportunity to talk about the importance of balance over the importance of flexibility.
Yes. I say it in my teacher training. The god of yoga, conventional yoga, it's not Shiva, it's not Ganesh, it's not Lakshmi, it's range of motion. Everyone is sitting there praying that they can put their foot behind their head for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I swear everyone tries to do Bec Conant and they lean forward and it looks like they're trying to smell their feet. It's not that good. Trust me, I've done it. They don't smell that good.
TikTok and Instagram and the small 1% who probably have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yes, and this is the thing. When I see advanced students come into my classes, I would say at least 75% of the time, they need strength. They don't need more range of motion. I have to pull them back out of it, which is the other reason I get worried when people are going to those fast-paced vinyasa classes, because those are still praying to the god of range of motion. And they are trying to push that edge. And in pregnancy, you have a hormonal shift in your body that is making you possibly 10% more flexible than you were before you were pregnant. And that increase, the hormone's called relaxin, aptly named, relaxin everything in your body. But it's relaxin, the highest peak is at the end of the first trimester, which is where I just think all these 8-week pregnant people haven't even told their yoga teacher they're pregnant yet. And they're going in deep, intense, wide open rotation. And it encourages the body to stay out of balance, ironically. And you mentioned, why is it important for balance versus flexibility? Balance means that your muscles are able to support your body where they need to support it, thus allowing the other muscles to relax and let go when they don't need to be supporting it. And this has massive implications when we get to the birth process and when we get to postpartum recovery.
And I just interviewed Sarah from who's the vagina whisperer, known as the
love her.
vagina whisperer. And this ties back to that podcast interview. If you guys haven't listened to that podcast interview, please go back and listen to that interview about balancing specifically the body to balance the pelvis.
Yes.
So that we avoid injury with this hormone relaxin surging, but that we also are able to contract the pelvic floor and equally relax the pelvic floor when those two things need to happen. Sometimes we need to release and sometimes we need to strengthen and draw up. And so I think that having these two episodes actually back to back with the vagina whisperer and with Bec, well, I should say with Sarah and then with Bec, these conversations very much complement one another, right? Bec, you just alluded to the fact that you have a 7-year-old.
Yes.
But we are talking about a journey that spans back 22 years. So, you know, the audience is concluding right now that you were doing this for a long time before you engaged in the full-term pregnancy journey with your child.
Yes.
How did you make that leap, I would say, as being an expert in the field, and then all of a sudden you find yourself pregnant and having to apply those principles to your own body?
I mean, it was so humbling to, to find myself in that experience. And it almost felt like I was trying to navigate while looking behind me at what was going on. Like, I would know that I was coming into the end of early and beginning of early second trimester, and that would mean that these things were happening gestationally with my body, and that would mean that this sort of thing was occurring, and I probably should modify these postures and start backing away. But it completely caught me off guard to experience. I remember I was teaching a postnatal class, hadn't told anybody I was pregnant yet, and I was lying on my stomach. I was demonstrating lifting up into locust. And I suddenly felt like I had this large sweet potato sitting in my belly. And I thought, oh, that wasn't there yesterday. Well, that's interesting. All right, let me just come down. I'll get up and walk around the class instead of actually demoing this one because, oh, okay, so that's what that feels like. And it was a very eye-opening experience to be in that place of, I've read all the books, I know all the people, and I still don't quite recognize what's going on. It's still new and different, and as we've talked about, but when it came to the birth experience, I thought I'd done everything right. It was, you know, I was practicing yoga. I was teaching yoga. I wasn't actually practicing that much because I figured teaching was practicing. Not so much. And, you know, I took all the birth classes. I taught my husband some of the birth classes. I mean, it was slightly comical, actually. I remember we had to go take a hypnobirthing class because my husband he looked at me and said, well, you could just teach me. I said, no, sweetie, I can't be your childbirth education teacher. I need to take this from the point of view of the student. He said, oh, yeah, I guess that's right. And he thought we didn't need a doula because I was a doula. At which point I pointed out to him, I said, sweetie, I might be busy. If we're birthing and we don't have a doula and you think I'm going to coach you, I might be busy at that point. He goes, oh, that's right. You might not be talking. I said, yeah, I might not be talking. So you might need somebody from that.
Bec, I think that you already, though, were setting yourself up. Even though it's very humbling and it's hard to change seats. It's hard to go from teacher to student. It's hard to go from giver to receiver. But I think that you were already setting yourself up in a lot of ways for a positive birth experience. I found myself in the same shoes that you were in. I had been a birth worker for 10 years. And I had a fertility journey before I became pregnant with my first. I was, nearing 40 years old. And
Sounds familiar.
yeah, I was like, we have a lot of parallels. And, but I did not hire a doula because, again, my partner was like, you're a doula. We don't need a doula. And I was like, yeah, I'm a doula. I don't need a doula. So I think as we move forward in this story, Bec and I want those of you that do a job to, and pick a job. If you're a cardiologist and you have a heart problem, you need your own cardiologist, right?
Yeah.
If you are a yoga instructor, you need your own yoga practice with your own teacher. If you are a doula, you need your own doula. If you are a therapist, you need your own therapist. If you're a body worker, you need your own body worker. And there are times where, for whatever reason, we resist changing from teacher to student, from giver to receiver. So I think actually you did quite a good job with some of the pieces of it.
Some of them. I did definitely go through. I think the strangest part was because I was a birth worker, I knew everybody. So you can't really do interviews with your friends about whether or not they should be your doula. I had to be I was actually rather sneaky. Every time I went to one of the workshops, I was kind of quietly interviewing and paying attention to who did I feel comfortable with? Who did I want as my midwife? Who did I want as my backup midwife? Who did I want as my doula / birth photographer? Who did I want to have in this scenario? We planned a home birth. Who did I want as my backup hospital? And that was one place I acknowledge I did have an advantage. And I say this to all of my students now who are looking for doulas, who are trying to decide where they should birth and should they be with the doctor that they're with. And I say, listen, if you're talking with doulas, those doulas have seen behind the scenes. They know who actually gives good bedside support and who is just doing lip service. They know, and they have all had amazing and not so amazing experiences. Ask them what they know. Find out what's the what's the sneaky behind the scenes insider information here, because you won't know until you get there.
Yep. And who is bait and switch?
Yeah.
Right? Who tells you everything's going to be perfect, and then we know for sure they're just going to slap you with a 39-week induction after they've told you or it's not that they told you it wasn't going to happen. They withheld that information from you until you were in a place of fear. And the amount of people that I switch, there's two main practices that out of hundreds in my area, and there's really only two main practices that I say, the only midwives that are aligned in a hospital-based setting with what your dreams and your intentions are, they only lie here. So if you are not going to take my advice as knowing what's going on behind the scenes, then I cannot guarantee that these things are not going to happen to you. And so we're going to have to do some extra preparation, if you're going to stay with what I would say is the wrong practice or the wrong hospital system. It's very difficult. What brought you to home birth?
Honestly, what you just said, because I knew what went on in hospitals. I knew what was happening. I knew the potential interruptions that could happen. And I knew that I had a fundamental belief that my body was completely capable of birthing this baby, and that I did not need a medical setting in order to feel safe.
Okay.
So for me, home was where I wanted to be for this.
Home for you equaled safety. And we know statistically it is very hard for people to accept this statistic. The safest place you can give birth is at home. And that is proven year after year after year. And somehow we still live in a society that doesn't believe the data.
It is so ingrained in our cultural picture of birth that this is a dangerous, complicated experience that requires medical professionals. And I always say to my childbirth ed students, this is one of the weirdest times you would ever go into a hospital. You go into a hospital when you're pregnant and in labor in a state of health. It's the most wacky place to walk into a hospital. A hospital is not good at dealing with people in a state of health. They're used to dealing with people in a state of illness or injury. And at that point, you want them to do something. You want them to intervene. You want them to step up. But in labor, especially if we are not intending to use any kind of medication, you are going into a hospital and asking them to sit back. And for them, that is a very strange ask.
And they are very uncomfortable.
Yes.
With watching physiological birth unfold and not playing a role other than holding space and being witness and not being needed, right? Only about 3 to 4% of births need, and I mean need, intervention to safely bring baby earthside and to also protect the mom. 3 to 4%. And that even might be a little high. So, and also when you enter into a hospital system, there is a culture of pain versus power, right? They don't say, how powerful do you feel right now? They say, what's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, now you're telling me I'm in pain. You're using language that I wouldn't use for myself. I would not describe childbirth as painful. I would describe childbirth as very intense, right? But it's also the most powerful I have ever felt in my entire life, and the most connected I've ever felt to the earth and to the universe and to, light. It took yoga for me in the concept of namaste, right? The light in me sees the light in you. It was almost like doing acid. It was like, not that I would know what that was like, or mushrooms. It was like I did see the light in me, and then I saw the light in everyone else. And I was like, stop talking to me, everyone. Stop trying to disrupt this process. Home birth is not for everyone, but it was clearly a beautiful path that you set out on because you used the word safe. And I think finding safety in birth is primary, right?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that when I teach hypnobirthing classes, I often say, you cannot, it is not the same experience of birth if you do not feel safe. If you feel triggered, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, your body pumps out literally a different cocktail of chemicals than it would pump out if you felt safe, seen, and held. And in that case, and this is why I say, home birth is not for everybody. For some people, that would be an absolutely panic-inducing experience, in which case, well, then you should be in a hospital, by all means. But now you got to go back and find out what's going on behind the scenes. Find out you need to find the provider who not only agrees with the way you want to birth, but is willing to go to bat with you against whatever hospital protocols might usually get in the way of your having the most unencumbered birth possible from that.
And I will say, often my clients can't work through their fear in the 10 months we're working together. It's just not a long enough period of time to process the trauma that they've never processed before. And we just don't get there. And they are a planned epidural. And that is okay.
That's fine.
But what I think people need to come to terms with is that birth is very long, and that unless you're in an induction, you are not laboring at a hospital for 24 hours. Most of your labor is actually going to be a home labor. Mm-hmm. And if you choose to transfer to the hospital, then it's a hospital birth. But I do find my clients need a lot of direction and comfort on how to labor at home and not race to the hospital where they will not be admitted. They will not be. So
I'm glad to hear they won't be admitted where you are. Here in Boston, they often will admit you even if you're not completely in labor.
Oh, they will
really
not here. Maybe we're just short-staffed and don't have enough rooms, but I had a VBAC the other day show up at 5 centimeters dilated, and she didn't appear to be like in enough, and I'm going to say pain, for them to admit her.
Goodness.
And I finally said, listen, she's about to have this baby. I've been laboring with her all day. I don't care that you did a vaginal exam and she's, I'm going to air quote, only 5 centimeters dilated.
I tell people if you're less than 5, go home. But if you're more than 5 and if you're at 5, ask what station the baby's at, because that's going to influence how fast they're dropping.
And I will tell you, this baby was a -3, but I just had this feeling. Intuition is a lot of birth work. And I just said, if her water breaks, the baby's coming. This baby is coming. And she delivered an hour and a half later.
I was going to say, and how long was it until that kid was in her arms?
Yes. So birth can unfold quite quickly. Birth is very unpredictable. So let's go to your birth. How old were you when this pregnancy occurred?
So I was 41 when I got pregnant, and I was actually due on my birthday. And Sawyer decided to actually go into labor on my birthday. So I was 42 when I went into labor. And I will say this, it is one thing that I did use as a birth professional. We lied about my estimated due date to everyone except maybe 4 people. My whole family thought I was due 14 days later.
Perfect.
Because I didn't want anyone calling me to say, are you in labor yet? And the only downside to that is that I will say, when you are due on your birthday and you go into labor on your birthday, you cannot skip the birthday brunch that you had set up, because if you do, everyone will know that you're in labor. So I had to go to brunch that morning.
Which was probably quite good for your early labor.
Which was brilliant. I had all the protein and all the complex carbs.
Yes.
So all the eating going on. But as far as my family knew, the baby was, air quotes here, head-butting my bladder, because I periodically just, oh no, I'm good. Kid's just head-butting my bladder. It's okay.
No contractions.
I'm just going to go to the bathroom here for a minute. I'll be back.
No contractions are happening over here.
No, not at all.
Or if you did hypnobirthing, we would have said surges.
I did actually use hypnobirthing for this. Yeah. So there was quite a lot of breathing and just visualizing. Everything's good. All the surges are happening right now. All the waves coming.
So that was early in the morning. I would say that you were recognizing, did you believe that maybe you were having some prodromal labor, or did your intuition say this is early labor, this is going to progress today?
My intuition, honestly, I didn't know. My intuition said this is probably early labor. Let's see what happens. I was taking a very relaxed and groovy kind of attitude around it. And we had brunch. We went back home. I said, honey, let's try to take a nap. Tried to take a nap. Nap wasn't happening. There was just too much tightening. It was not pain. I will say this. It was not pain. It was very strong tightening and pressure in my abdomen, but it was not pain. And I said, okay, we're not going to watch this. This is not going to happen. So let's get up. Let's watch a movie. Because you know this. Name of the game in early labor, distract yourself from the fact that you might even be in labor. Go to brunch. Go for a walk. take a nap, watch a movie, go play with the dog, do anything but focus on labor for a while.
Because it will soon swallow you. So when it's not swallowing you, ignore it.
Live life until all you can do is labor.
Yes.
And then you labor.
Thank you, Bec. Thank
Yes.
you. Yes.
So we sit down, we're watching The Princess Bride, and I start feeling this pinchy feeling in the front of my abdomen, lower, right across my pubic bone area. Don't think much of it. Try changing positions. Doesn't really seem to go away. I'm also getting what felt like hip flexor. I now know it was deeper. It was psoas connection, but I'm getting hip flexor and psoas contractions with the labor contractions. So I'm getting this like cramping going down my thighs feeling.
Mm-hmm.
We call the midwife. Midwife comes over. She said on the phone, "You don't sound like you're really fully in labor, but I'll come over and check." She got there and she looked at me and said, "Right, I'm calling our secondary. I'm staying. This is it."
Did she do a vaginal exam?
No,
Okay, good.
no. I think we only did like one or two of them total, but
Total waste of time in
the
my
pattern
mind.
and my demeanor and the fact that they were coming about every 4 to 5 minutes at that point. So it was definitely progressing. And so at this point, labor becomes a bit of a blur because
It's
labor does that when you start to go inward. I remember we did a whole bunch we tried some spinning babies movements. I didn't really understand what spinning babies was all about at the time. We did a lot of sitting on the toilet. I was throwing up a whole lot.
There goes
and I thought
brunch.
that was good because I was like, transition, here we go.
Oh, that's so.
Yeah.
Yes, we do throw up in transition, but
Yes.
it's very important to know sometimes you can just start throwing up at the onset of labor or
Right.
when the intensity changes. I've noticed that, like when we have big shifts in intensity or big shifts in baby dropping, there'll be a series of vomiting, and then it's fine. And it's a little more intense in transition.
I often say your body's opening very fast down below, so it opens very fast up above as well sometimes. So, and throughout all of this, that pubic bone pinching, grinding feeling isn't going away. It's starting to persist between contractions now.
Okay, so I have no idea where we're going with this birth story back. Okay. But in November, I had a story that started with pinching and burning
Yep.
and right above the pubic bone.
Yep.
And it was we were in the hospital. It was she was unmedicated, but it was very concerning to the midwife. And the midwife looked at me and said, in over 1,000 births, Heidi, how many people have you heard mention a pinching and burning sensation when the contraction ends? And I said, none. I haven't ever heard this before. And she said, pay attention because you're about to learn something today.
Yes.
And so I am so curious to see where we're going with this story.
Well, I was going to say, I'm curious on this birth. Maybe afterwards we can share stories on that one. But
yeah,
we basically kept, we got in the tub. There was a leak in the tub. It kept deflating itself. We had to keep blowing it back up. We eventually gave up on the tub, got in our regular tub, which wasn't big enough. And at some point, like the pubic bone just kept searing pain. It kept bothering me in between contractions. It would go down to maybe like a 6, and then during contractions, it would go to 11. So what I will usually say to people is, if you feel actual pain in labor, something like burning, ripping, tearing, not strong muscle engagement, but if it feels like actual pain, don't ignore it. Don't take the attitude of, oh, well, it's just labor. I guess labor hurts, so therefore, oh my. We just have to endure it. No, your body is talking to you at that moment. I had this internal sense because of all this hip flexor cramping. I wanted to go backwards for some reason. I had this feeling of like, I want to lie over the bed and do a deep psoas stretch release thing. And here is where I did not take the advice that I give all of my clients. I say there's only room for one head in the pelvis and it had better be the baby's. So you've got to get out of your head and you've got to get into your body. Whatever your body wants you to do, you want to be doing it. And I got in my own head and I said, well, but if baby is not optimally positioned, leaning forward is the best way, because the heaviest part of the baby is the back of the baby's body. So if we lean forward, gravity will rotate them to face towards your spine, and that's more optimal. So I should always be leaning forward, which is going to help these hip flexors slacken and relax anyway. I was half right. It was letting the hip flexors slacken, but it also pushed his head farther over the front of my pubic bone, as we found out later.
Mm-hmm. So I will say the leaning backwards and kind of thrusting, like almost sometimes it feels good to lay on the side of the bed with the legs hanging off of the bed and your back completely going and just kind of rotating those hips upward. There's an official position called Walters, which people will do. But again, what Bec's saying is our body is the teacher. Your body will tell you lean forward, lean backward, lean left, lean right, as long as you're in an unmedicated birth process. I cannot reiterate enough, Bec, what you are talking about is that I use the sentence in labor all the time. Is it painful, like it feels like a wrongness? Or does it feel hard? Yeah. Does this just feel like intense pressure and it's something hard that you're doing? Or does it feel like a wrongness? So if it feels like a wrongness to lean forward, then you need to find what feels hard, but a rightness, which in Bec's case was leaning backwards.
And it's that question is hard to answer. It is. Because in the intensity and moment of labor, I will say leaning forward did not feel wrong. Leaning back felt wrong because it hurt more for a period of time, or would have. But we actually, we did a couple vaginal exams. As it turned, they thought I actually got to fully opened. As we now know, probably it was only about 9 centimeters open. But we actually started trying to push to see if we could get the baby to come down. I thought my pubic bone was going to crack in 2 the whole time. And I do remember having a thought of, I know all the pelvic floor physical therapists, so to hell with it. I'm just going to break my pelvis to get this kid out.
Question for you. Yeah. In your pregnancy, did you have something called symphysis pubic dysfunction? Any pain? No. Okay.
I didn't have any SPD. I had nothing.
So this started only with the labor surges.
Only in labor.
Wow.
This started.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there was this, it becomes this kind of back and forth. We were trying to push, and then it wasn't happening. And then she said, your cervix is actually swelling up a little bit. So let's use some homeopathic ways and lie down, take the pressure off. Okay. Now I rest for a couple of hours, check again, still swollen. Okay, let's go lie in the tub. That was more comfortable for you. All right, let's try that. My blood pressures at home are starting to climb at this point. And I think we're coming up on maybe 36 hours at home at this point. And the midwife, I'm in the tub, I remember, and she took my blood pressure and she said, okay, that's the 3rd time that you've spiked over 140 over 90. And she said, I don't think we can safely stay at home you're not peeing, you're throwing up a lot, and you don't look right. I want to get you an IV. We can't do that here. And I want to get some more monitoring on you. This isn't going the right way. She said, we're not going to the hospital to necessarily to be high intervention. We're really going just for an IV and a little extra check on baby.
Because
But how do you feel about that?
I was going to say, because physiological birth typically unfolds quite easily.
Yes.
And when you start experiencing what Bec said was swollen cervix, it's called pasmo. There's a Spanish word, pasmo, that means like regressing cervix. And it's the body's way of protecting, meaning the baby, something is going on with the way the baby has engaged the pelvis or is engaging the pelvis, or something else medically is going on where the cervix is very smart and it starts to say, I'm going to close here a little, because it's not, something is not right now.
Yeah.
So I actually love how proactive your home birth midwife was.
She's amazing. And she was so wonderfully supportive. And I mean, all of us were kind of going, what is going on between me, her, the backup baby midwife, and the doula? We probably had 2,000 births between all of us. And so all of us are sitting there going, why is this moving in this way where contractions were coming regularly? They've also slowed down at this point. Another signal that the body's taking a break, and for a good reason. So we ultimately decide, all right, we're going to transfer. This is not an emergency situation, so we aren't going to the hospital that's 3 minutes away. We're going to drive in to Mount Auburn Hospital, which was ironically, it was the place I was born. It was actually where my mother went.
Wow. Now, what was your intuition telling you? Was your intuition saying, yes, I agree with this decision?
My intuition was saying, I need some help. It wasn't clear what the help was, but my intuition was saying, I need some help, and if we can't get it here, okay, then we'll go there. And I had fortunately, you said there's only like two practices that you really encourage people to go towards if they're looking for an unmedicated birth. The doctor who was our backup, she wasn't officially our backup, but she was someone I knew from my days in the birth world, and I had wandered through her office just to tell her about the Homebirths program. While I was pregnant, we got talking. Oh, what are you doing? You're doing a home birth. Oh, that's fabulous. I love it. Who's your midwife? Told her, love it. Absolutely great. You've got the dream team. This is such a good thing. If anything happens, you can call me. And I thought, oh, thank God, you're the one doctor I trust in the entire Boston medical area that I would be willing to go to. So we got there. By the time, now it's at a steady 8 and it goes to 12 when the contractions come. I'm absolutely beside myself. So we get there and I pretty much immediately say epidural. I need this pain to end so that I can get some rest. I haven't slept.
You crossed the threshold into suffering. And that happens often after 36 hours, right? Most people have given birth by now. So those that don't give birth by 36 hours, some people will cross that threshold to suffering, and there is wise and compassionate use of medical interventions like an epidural.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this doctor I love, because she was saying, okay, I was wondering if we were at that point. That is fine. Let's get that taken care of, and then we'll draw labs and we'll get you admitted and we'll figure out what's going on. So we do that. I get the epidural. Labs come back. kidney function is flat out wrong. I'm in kidney failure from what this is showing.
Preeclampsia?
No,
No?
did not have preeclampsia. This was actually hindsight. We figured out what happened after he was born, because it had to do with his position and his head being extended rather than flexed. So we had basically dual pressure on the ureters in my body that had pinched off the flow down to my bladder.
And that's why you were not peeing.
That's why I wasn't peeing also. So,
red flag.
And I was drinking all the fluids too.
Yeah, red flag.
Yes.
You should be having to urinate at least once per hour when your uterus is contracting.
So this is part of why I love this doctor. She said, I want to start a little bit of Pitocin because your contractions have pretty much stopped. And then let's see where we are in 2 hours.
Okay. Was she able to drain your bladder with a catheter?
There was almost nothing in it.
That's very scary.
Yeah, that was concerning. And she did not panic. She did not start bringing fear and catastrophe into the room. She absolutely just said, let's try this and let's see what happens.
Okay.
And 2 hours, she came back. We did a vaginal exam. She said, okay, your cervix is no longer swollen. You've gone to about 9. Your kidney level, however, is continuing to get worse. So I can give you 2 more hours, but after that, we are going to need to talk other options. And I sort of sat there thinking, well, I'm pretty sure there's only one other option, but okay, we'll go 2 more hours. She was back 2 hours to the minute, which was the other indication for me of, you are actually quite worried because that wasn't 2.5 hours. You came back at the minute you said you would be back. She checked. I hadn't gone further. I was only at 9.
Now, did you have a doula?
Yep.
And did
my midwife came, we switched roles. The home birth midwife transitioned to the role of doula. And this doctor was so fabulous. She treated her as a colleague rather than as a support person. So she said, do you have her medical records? Can we talk about what you saw in terms of the history of this? She talked to her as if that was my doctor.
Excellent. I love it. Was the midwife, kind of besides, I know you said you needed deep rest. Hard for me to hear also because I'm thinking not only do you need deep rest, but we need significant rotation.
Yep.
So can you tell me did you guys try were they doing, inversions and shake the apples and, eggs, sideline releases?
Not as much once the epidural took effect. We did some spider person rolling almost onto your belly with a leg over and then rolling other way. Hindsight 2020, we should have done flying cowgirl because that would have, and for those that don't know, that's a position with a peanut ball or a bunch of pillows between your knees and kind of the Walcher's position we talked about earlier, the thrust the pelvis forward, drag the legs back, yoga would call it bow pose, this big arching back bend, but it opens the top level of the pelvis and stretches out the psoas muscles.
Yep. Absolutely.
Hindsight's 2020. We didn't know.
And then let me follow that up because I am a certified spinning babies doula also. And who cares? I mean, I hate to say who cares about spinning babies. I also just know how to flip babies around after 22 years.
Yeah.
After flying cowgirl, after Walcher's, I would have then immediately done an inversion. And I would have actually asked the obstetrician to have manually pushed the baby to a higher station. Once you're in the inversion, and it's not comfortable, but with an epidural, it's much more comfortable, actually disengaging the head from the pelvis. Sometimes they can do a manual rotation, but having the chest way lower than the pelvis. And then you do something called shake the apples, where you actually
Yes.
put a sheet or a cloth and just shake the baby out of their position that they're stuck in. If someone's stuck at 9 centimeters, 9 centimeters, 9 centimeters, the head has not properly engaged the pelvis and is not applying consistent pressure onto the cervix. So that is just one. I just want people to hear, like, well, also, I just want you to hear the value of having an experienced doula on your team. But if I had been there with you, we would have done flying cowgirl, we would have done Walters. And then as soon as I felt like, and I would have had manual internal rotation by the obstetrician, and then we would have done an inversion, like the biggest headstand I could get you in.
Yeah.
And then we'd start over.
I want to point out to everybody, she's talking about doing this with an epidural. I think there are a lot of doulas out there and nurses who won't think about using manual positioning with an epidural. They sort of, you're relegated to lying on your back, lying on your right side, lying on your left side, and that's it. And I've heard nurses say, no, you can't get on hands and knees with an epidural, and it's just not true, folks. You need more support. You do need more support for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love this idea.
Back to the right provider. I have literal providers in the hospitals that say to the client, you cannot push in any position other than lithotomy on your back. And then I say, great, well, we won't be delivering with you. Right? And this is where you have to seek out the providers who have been trained in spinning babies, who know how to work with anesthesia to move your body with an epidural. I argue to every client, if you are planning an epidural, then the use of a doula is way more important than if you're planning an unmedicated birth.
Yes, I would agree with that.
They're both important.
As soon as you lose your ability to maneuver your own legs, you need a third set of hands at that point.
Yes. Okay. So we still have the kidney problem going on, though.
We still have the kidney problem going on.
And your OB is very worried. She's come in 2 hours on the dot. And what does she say?
She checks again. So we've now had 4 hours since the epidural took effect. And she checks. She holds her hand out. She says, okay, so you're still 9. And at this point, I am very concerned about having you continue to labor in this state.
Without urine output and in kidney
Without,
failure.
she said, your urine output, and they put in, they did a straight cath, and then they just put a Foley in. And she said, your output is bare minimum of what I would expect, given you're having an IV running in fluid at this point. And I looked at her and I said, okay, you know what question I'm about to ask because we've been in births together. Am I or my baby in danger in this moment? And I looked at her face and I thought, I know that face. That's the face that I have seen when we had an actual, like the 3%, when we had a medical emergency that needed to be taken care of. Yeah. And she said, your baby is fine. You, however, are in danger. I want you to recover from this birth. I want your kidneys to recover from this birth. And where you are right now, I have to recommend cesarean. You know I don't recommend this lightly, especially not to you. But this is, I think, where we're at. And I remember my first thought was we made a mistake coming into the hospital. We should have stayed home. And then I thought about it again, and I looked at her and I said, no, this is one of those cases where you do actually need to be there. And I said, okay, if we're doing this, how do we make this still be a positive experience? How do we make this be what I want? And she said, she walked through. She said, she said, first of all, baby's fine. So I think this is going to be, we're going to do gentle cesarean. We have a clear drape that we can put. I can't put the baby immediately from the incision on your chest because we can't pass through the drape.
The sterile field. Yeah.
Sterile field. And she's like, we don't have, what she actually said was, we're not Star Trek. We haven't made the force field yet to be able to pass through it.
I like that.
This doctor. She said, but what I can do is I can bring him. You can see him for a moment. And then she said, I can do some delayed cord clamping. She said, I'm okay with 30 seconds. A minute makes me a little queasy, but I can do it if you really want it. And I looked at her and I said, well, ACOG's recommendations is no less than a minute of delayed cord clamping, so we're going to do a minute of delayed cord clamping. Somebody was like, you pulled ACOG in the middle of this on somebody?
Oh my gosh. What great advocacy, though. And also milking the cord, right? They can
I didn't want her to do that because I didn't actually want... I know there's some indications of increased jaundice when you're milking. So I said, I don't want to be dealing with that, but I want that 1 minute of delayed. And so she said, so what will happen is we'll bring him, we'll wait a minute, clamp, cut. Now at that point, he's going to need to go to the warmer for a quick moment assessment. We'll get a weight, and then he will come direct onto your skin, and you can have that bonding moment.
Could you envision it?
Not completely.
Okay.
I at least had a mental picture of, okay, these are the steps that might happen. I was also starting to shake pretty severely at this point. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, we talked through a few more things about it. You know, do you know the sex of the baby? Yes. Okay. So we don't need to worry about announcing from that. Dad, you want to do a sort of trimming the cord? We can't do a full cut right there, but you could do that. Okay. And then we'll come around. Okay. We'll do that. Can the doula come in? Yes, she can come in. Can she bring cameras? Yes.
Yay.
They can come in.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's amazing. We are allowed in the operating room here in one hospital system and not allowed in the other hospital system. And it makes a world of difference to have continuous labor support, which means including if the labor turns into a cesarean delivery. So God, I love this hospital and I love this OB and I love this midwife. I'm so happy with you. I mean, I'm happy with your story. I don't know.
They were fabulous, fabulous people.
Yes.
And so we signed the paperwork, and I walked my husband through. I was like, honey, you're going to put on a pair of scrubs. Keep your clothes on. Don't it's just a paper gown. Don't take off your clothing. Just put on everything over it. And then I remember they wheeled me back, and that was where my meditation practice took over, because I pretty much was like, okay, be here. Be present. This is the birth of your kid. You are not going to get to experience this again. Be here in that moment. And I remember they moved me onto the operating table, and I was like, the timeline's a little bit foggy, but they upped the epidural, all the things that they would usually do. They got my husband sitting next to me. They got the midwife doula sitting behind him. And I didn't actually know that they'd started the surgery. I don't think I quite realized the timing of what was happening. They did do the pause, read through who is this? Why are we doing this? What is the procedure we're in the middle of? There was a point that I did feel something. And I screamed bloody murder at the doctor, and she pulled up, stopped, and she said, what? And I said, I felt that. Whatever that was, I just felt that. And she said, okay, hold on. I think the anesthesiologist said something over my shoulder, and The doctor looked straight across me at him and said, "She's not going to want that." And then she looked back, she said, "Bec, he's talking about giving you ketamine, and I'm pretty sure you want to be conscious and aware when this baby comes." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Hold on a minute." I don't know what she did. I think my guess is she took the entire bottle of anesthesia and just poured it into the
I was going to say
incision site.
lidocaine.
I have no idea what it was, but suddenly, like, boom, no sensation at all.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. She's like, "Now you're good? Okay." And then, I mean, as a doula, having sat in on cesareans, like, I recognized what was happening. And the nurse said, "You're going to feel a lot of pressure on your chest." I was like, okay. And now I start listening for huge pressure in my pelvis. Suddenly there's no pressure in my pelvis and I can hear my baby crying. And they brought him right up to the other side of the drape. And I remember all I was saying was, "Oh, baby. Oh, baby." Because we didn't have a name for him yet. It was, oh, baby. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. I didn't have any other name. "Hi, baby." And he went over to the warmer. My husband got a bunch of pictures of him, and then he came around and he's on my chest. And they pulled up the blue part of the drape so that I couldn't see what was going on. They finished the surgery, and I was shaking uncontrollably. I almost couldn't hold him on my chest. And as doulas, we see this post-birth. We see this like unwind. And I've actually read that it's the nervous system releasing the trauma. It's the nervous system taking the brakes off the fight, flight, freeze side of things. And it's sort of like as the brake gets going, the accelerator's going too, and your whole body just starts shaking. And I always said it to my clients, which was, don't fight it. Let yourself shake. I know it feels really weird, but let yourself shake because it will let your body let go.
Regulate.
What you're holding on. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Have you heard the analogy with the possums? Like
Yep.
they go fight, flight, freeze. So they go freeze. They look like they're dead.
Yep.
And then they wake up and then they shake uncontrollably. And then they're regulated and they're ready to be back into whatever had caused them to go into freeze. Right. That's the letting go of that previous moment that they were in. It's quite beautiful how nature just replicates itself.
Yeah. It's amazing how well the body knows what it's doing. And so from there, 45 minutes to an hour of skin to skin on my chest while they finished doing the surgery. And then he went in a bassinet to go to the recovery room. He went with me. There was no separation to go to the nursery or anything like that. And we got back in the room. They brought him back onto me. I got him to latch. There's a picture of me. I'm holding him. My husband looks completely bleary-eyed, and the doctor is there. And I said to her, I was like, "Thank you. Thank you. This is like, this could not have been better. I would never have expected a surgical birth could have been a positive experience given where I was coming from." But the picture is hilarious. Somebody looked at it and they're like, "So who's Bec's girlfriend that she's talking to there? Because you're like in love with this doctor who's holding."
That oxytocin rush
I was like,
"That's
real.
Oxytocin." That is so beautiful. So when Bec and I were kind of talking a little bit before the podcast, I used the word inappropriately. I used the word traumatic. And that is my own shit I have to work through from years and years of going to birth, because what I've seen is when clients plan a free birth or a home birth, and then they end their story in a cesarean section, it's kind of like as far opposite ends as you can get,
Well, it totally is.
In birth world.
It is.
But you never used the word, you said it was a very positive experience. You never said that the way you feel this in your body is traumatic. And I was wondering, what do you think are the key elements? We heard all of them, but I think to summarize them, what are the key elements that kept you present in positivity?
I think the first one, and probably the most important, is having people around me who listened, who paid attention, and who let me be the one to make the decision about it. It was not a decision that I felt was forced on me, even though there were really no other options. She did say, I kind of have to recommend this. We then spent 90 minutes talking about how do we make this a positive experience? What is important to me about this moment? What is the story behind why I wanted a home birth? What does it mean for me to shift to a surgical birth? How are we going to make this? How are we going to preserve as much of what we wanted from that home birth experience, with the understanding that now this is going to occur in a surgery ward? And what do we need to do? And then even when the surgery was happening, she stayed connected to me. She looked right at me. She talked to me. It wasn't, I'm now interacting only with professionals around me. So there was, I think, a big part of it that I was able to stay present because I felt that I was actually welcomed in the experience. I was part of it instead of being a vessel for the baby.
And I actually believe that the clear drape, people are scared because they think they're going to see the surgery. I'm like, you're laying down. You're not going to see the surgery. The purpose is so that you can see the team and stay connected. And the purpose is so that you can see the baby, but you will not be seeing the surgery.
No. As I tell my students when we talk about cesarean, I say, listen, try lying down flat on your back and look at your abdomen without picking up your head. You can't see anything. All you see is your boobs. That's it. It's just big boobs, and that's it. There's nothing that you can see past that point. So it's not like, and even the instrument, you don't even see any scalpels or clamps. You can't see any of that because it's all down below your visual field.
Mm-hmm. So you think, I love the way that you said it, is that like your experience was considered and that you weren't just being seen as a vessel for this baby. Like you were recognized as a human with feelings and a human with preferences. And I think it's really beautiful. I also think that I would add that you, like, all of that to me is just that you chose the correct team.
I do think I was very fortunate to know who the correct team was going to be.
Mm-hmm. So as we start to kind of come full circle at the end of this podcast, how did this knowingness and this experience, well, these are experiences come to us to teach us and to teach us so that we can teach others. How did this shape your practices as a birth worker, as a yoga instructor, as an author, as a childbirth educator? What changed for you?
I think there were two big shifts that happened. One of which was that prior to having my own kid, while I was supportive of whatever version of birth mom wanted to have, because, well, it's her birth, she gets to have the birth that she feels comfortable with, there was still a little bit of a bias saying, yeah, but a natural birth's better with that. And I really didn't understand how a surgical or intervention heavy birth could still be positive. Like, it seemed like that had to be stripping away all of your own agency from it. And going through my own experience and recognizing that no, actually, sometimes making the choice to have the epidural is the more empowering experience. To say, I choose this. And so it's shaped the way I now frame most of my childbirth education. And I still teach hypnobirthing, which doesn't even talk about epidurals in it.
But it teaches about language.
It
and
does.
language is important. And in hypnobirthing, the language that others use to support you and the language that you use to speak to yourself about choices. So you may not talk about epidurals, but you learn to speak a language in hypnobirthing that focuses on positive self-speak.
Yes, which is key. We have to believe in ourselves if we're going to actually speak up for ourselves.
Now, had you written your book, Homebirths, yet?
I had not written the Homebirths approach yet, actually. Okay. The Homebirths approach, that came into being because of some professional things, some liaisons with other yoga studios that made me realize I needed to coalesce a lot of this information that I had into a usable format and into something that people could take and actually put into practice. And the part that the other side of what shifted, some of it was recognizing that an intervention birth doesn't have to be a traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be disempowering. The other was recognizing how much that balance piece is critical in practicing yoga and movement and getting connected and prepared in your body for the birth experience. Because ultimately, hindsight's 2020, but what we figured out is I had a rock hard psoas muscle, which is like my mentor always says, think of it as two loving hands on either side of the pelvis guiding the baby in to the pelvis. I said, well, my loving hands were like squished together. There was no room for him to come down. And because of that rigid psoas, my pelvic floor was completely locked up. And it was not until 10 months later when I actually got my own training in spinning babies and got this picture of this overall holistic body balance, not just are my hips flexible, can I do a back bend, but what is the relative tone in my body overall that would then lead to that pathway through my pelvis being restored to its original open state, which it would have been. So when I wrote the Homebirths approach, it was taking different ways of practicing, talking about reining them in, getting into a position or a place where you're in that sort of middle ground, not too tight, not too loose. And I split it up into, there's an anatomy section, there's a practice section, and then there's a section about childbirth education. Because I feel like a lot of yoga practices, we talk about great positions for birth. We talk about, some people even do talk about balancing, but then they don't always say, and here's why this actually impacts the birth process. Here's what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that is what Bec is describing is that it is a global picture. It's not one thing. Yeah. When people are like, "What?" It's not just doing yoga. It's not just going to pelvic floor therapy. It's not just doing meditation. It's not just doing breath work. It takes a lot of intention to have a positive birth experience within the parameters of the culture and society that we've been raised up in. I don't think that it was always this way, but the last several generations where we've moved birth away from home and we've been infected with a lot of messages that have closed our bodies up. Mm-hmm. So Bec, I appreciate you being here today and sharing your birth story and just sharing your life journey and everything that has led to the Homebirth approach. And could you just share one more time how we can get in your childbirth classes or join you online and buy your book? What's the best way to connect with you?
So the fastest way to find everything that I do is to go to my website, which is homebirths.com. There's a page about the book. There's a page about the individual programs. There's a page about the membership that I have, the full mama membership, which is prenatal and postnatal. There are pages about the live stream classes, the in-person classes. It says where to register for them, but they're directly through the studio that I teach at. And all live stream classes are always recorded, so they are available in an on-demand library that's segmented. I say it's playlists, but really it's different sort of topics that we were covering. So there's a whole set of classes about the pelvic floor. There's a whole set of classes about releasing your psoas. There's a whole set of classes about birth preparation and opening the top level, middle level, bottom level of your pelvis. Just really trying to make it easy for people to find what it is that they are looking for.
I think it sounds so beautiful. And I look forward to staying in touch, Bec, and to sending many clients to you. If you happen to be in the Boston area, please connect with Bec in person. Everything that she just said, if you are driving in your car or you're out for a walk, it is linked in the show notes. So you can always come back and get the links quite easily. Bec, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.